Welcome back to Campus Compact 20 virtual gathering. I hope everyone is well. I'm Marisol Morales, and I serve as the Vice President for Network Leadership with Campus Compact. We're about to get started with our next session, Learning from Seattle and Other Cities, Place-Based Community Engagement for Justice and Equity, presented by the folks from the Place-Based Justice Network. They'll be introducing themselves shortly, but just a few reminders. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and just a few housekeeping items to be mindful of. First, note that by participating in this event, you agree to abide by the Code of Conduct. Our staff will be sharing this in the chat now. We want to make sure this is a safe space for respectful, constructive conversation, so we appreciate you taking a moment to familiarize yourself with the Code of Conduct. If you have any questions for the presenters, please feel free to post those on the Facebook or YouTube Live chat, and our staff volunteers will be compiling those questions and we'll be sharing them during the Q&A session. Also, if you have any technical questions or issues, you can also post that in the chat, and our staff volunteers will try to assist you. So at this time, we'll get the session started. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Pigza from St. Mary's College of California. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the presentation that we'll be doing. Some thumbs up for my colleagues if that's working, please. Awesome. So if anything that this current pandemic and shelter at home time has taught us is that place and relationship are certainly central to our community flourishing. And so this session is an opportunity for us to share with you some of the insights, values, and practices of the Place-Based Justice Network, which is a national network of colleges and universities dedicated to long-term sustaining partnerships in our local communities towards equity, justice, and sustainability. So we're going to learn more about that. You will notice on the screen a full cast of characters listed as presenters. This session was originally a pre-conference with an embedded institute with 4 other opportunities throughout the conference. So we wanted to name everyone who was going to participate in that initial team. You'll notice the folks with asterisks are the ones who are here with us this morning. There we go. So here's our plan for the next hour. We'll have a land acknowledgement, a brief review of what is the Place-Based Justice Network and our core values, some examples from colleagues across the country, and then some future opportunities for learning. So we typically begin our place-based justice events with an acknowledgement of place. As we are focused in our local communities, we also want to honor historically whose land we are part of, and on whose land essentially perhaps we are borrowing, and in partnership with creating a more just community. So because I live in Oakland, California, and I'm coming to you from Oakland, I will offer a land acknowledgement for Oakland. Oakland sits on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo Ohlone, the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona brand of Alameda County. We recognize that every member of the Oakland community has and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold the community more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. So this expression, this land acknowledgement is again an expression of our gratitude and appreciation to those homelands that we reside on, and for those who have been living and working here in time immemorial. We also do this as a way to acknowledge that colonialism is an ongoing process, and that we need to build mindfulness of our present participation in colonialism. And the website that I've listed on this slide is from Cal State University San Marcos, which has a great resource if you are looking for more information about that. Kent.
Good morning. Greetings from Seattle. Wish you all were here, but a huge thank you to the Campus Compact team for the shift to move this into the virtual environment. It's really a gift, I think, for all of us to be connected. I'm Kent Koth, and I direct the Center for Community Engagement at Seattle University. For the past 10 years at Seattle University, we've focused our work as an institution and our partnerships as an institution on neighborhoods that are adjacent to our campus, just south of our campus, 100 square blocks of Seattle, and it's a connection with our schools, and community partners, housers, and others. In 2014, we started hosting some events at Seattle University, which was the precursor to the Place-Based Justice Network. And at that time, my colleague, Erica Yamamura, began to document some of the lessons we were learning, as well as others were learning around the country, about the approach to focusing community engagement on place. And that led to the opportunity for Erica and I to work on a book project in 2016 and 2017. Erica had a sabbatical, and we had some funding from the Annie Casey Foundation. We did a national profile of multiple different institutions, and then we focused on 5 institutions that exemplified the approach to place, and we looked for ways that they had some commonalities. Those institutions are Drexel University, Loyola University of Maryland, San Diego State University, the University of San Diego, and Seattle University. And from that exploration of site visits and document review, we developed this definition that you see on the screen. And there's several different parts of the definition that I'd like to unpack. I'll read it and then unpack each. A long-term university-wide commitment to partner with local residents, organizations, and other leaders to focus equally on campus and community impact within a clearly defined geographic area. There's really 5 elements of this definition. First, the long-term commitment. That place-based work is not an episodic involvement. It's a long-term, often without any definition of when it would end, commitment. The second element here is university-wide, and thinking as comprehensively about how we can bring the resources and the opportunities and the ways that our students can learn and our faculty can engage across the university to a place-based effort. The third is the partnership with local residents, organizations, and other leaders. This approach really is a collective impact approach that involves multiple different stakeholders functioning equally as partners, which sequences into the 4th element here, focusing equally on campus and community impact, which might be the most profound and edgy, if you will, aspect of this, because in general, our field focuses more on campus engagement and student learning. And then the final piece of the definition, which is probably more obvious, is the clearly defined geographic area and a focus for the university. I think in this time of COVID, the focus on place is even more significant, and hope that this definition is of benefit as we continue with our session today.
Erin?
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Kent. Hello from Baltimore, and it's good afternoon here. I just finished eating the first half of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich in honor of our Place-Based Justice Network. So for those of you who are eating lunch, it's a PBJ for choice today. It's important, I think Kent just really shared our network is a learning community across the country, as Jennifer shared, but also we have some international members as well. And so we really began this journey that we're on a little bit before 2014, as Kent mentioned. We had 12 different universities come together, gathering at Seattle University, funded by the Annie Casey Foundation at that time, to think about what is our role as universities in our cities, in our geographic area, in our regions, and how does place really impact community engagement work on our campuses, but then also our commitment as anchor institutions. And so the work that we are doing today is a long-term work of a number of committed universities. We have over 25 25 universities that have gone through 3-day institutes that we've offered for over 4 years now. And we have developed a set of values as well as ways that we are embodying those values in how we live about our work as members of the Place-Based Justice Network. And so I'll ask Jennifer to move to the next slide to just dig a little bit deeper into which values we do ascribe to and what do those actually mean. And so as you'll see here, we are committed to an anti-oppression framework that certainly recognizes intersectionality. And this is not just in our communities and how we're doing work externally, but also working with our students on campus, as well as our faculty on campus. As Kent referenced, we are very much committed to long-term work. And so as my colleague Marie here in Baltimore is going to share about our work locally, we are in our 10th year of our York Road Initiative here in Baltimore, Maryland. And when we think about how universities evolve, we're a part of the community around us. We're just one member of that community, and the work that that our campuses are doing needs to be sustained in ways for 20, 30, oftentimes 50 years to address some of the long-term opportunities and plans that are put in place on the ground. And so this is something that I think personally for me is really important about the values of our network, that we are grounded in that long-term approach that is reciprocal and very deliberative, and because we are a learning community committed to change constantly and through partnership with residents and community-based organizations and city leadership and the like. Likewise, we are really defined by where the community has asked us to and wants our university leadership and resources to engage. Our purpose is repowering community residents and others on the ground, fostering self-determination. And how that takes shape really does differ across our network, but is something that you'll see come up again and again. And that we also are personally and professionally committed to continuous individual and collective learning and action. As I said, we are a learning network. We hold each other accountable. As you'll hear from my colleagues on the call today, we do have a lot of check-ins, and we expect each other to continuously grow, not only individually, but the field as well. And we certainly honor that this work, in all forms that it takes, our radical work of both placing an equal emphasis on campus and community involves deep openness, integrity, and humility. So thank you for joining us. And Jennifer, I'll pass it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin and Kent, for giving us some context. So now we're going to lead into what is our virtual panel, if you will. We've got 4 colleagues who will share information about the place-based justice initiatives in each of their contexts. And they're going to, as the slide suggests, they're going to briefly describe what their initiative is, connect it to one of the place-based justice network values or a couple of them, so you can see how those are actualized in universities and communities. And on a personal, professional note, to add, like, why does this approach matter? Why is this distinctiveness of what we're talking about here matter to these folks, our colleagues who are assembled? So, and that's all in 4 to 5 minutes per person. So hang on, here we go. We will start in Pittsburgh. Jamie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jamila Ducar, but I go by Jamie. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the University of Pittsburgh in the Office of Community and Governmental Relations. And so I'd quickly like to just kind of share with you how the University of Pittsburgh made a deeply intentional, I'd say, made a deeply intentional, I'd say a transformational change in the way that they'd like to operate with community partnership. And so the neighborhood commitment message really emphasizes a long-term reciprocal commitment between neighborhoods and the university. And so that started with a community engagement center in Homewood. The position for that was really rooted in a process that opened very differently for the university. And so even to get the position, there was a community presentation that was made by the director of the CEC, Darren Ellerby. And she was successful mostly through deep authenticity in her connection to the neighborhood, her caring for the values of being able to bring university and communities together, and really a willingness to listen and to open up us institutionally to listen. So the CECs now are working on a second location in the Hill District. Our director there, Kirk Holbrook, also a member of the Place-Based Justice Network, has been working on the ground, having those same types of conversations in advance of his own space opening. We're in a temporary space right now. But I actually wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how transformational the CECs were to us as a team. I don't work as a CEC staff member. I work in the Office of Community and Governmental Relations that kind of sits alongside of that. And so as the CECs started to really build a culture around critical consciousness, around intentional processes, I was able to work with Dr. Lena Dostilio, who leads our work at Pitt, to be able to change what you would think of as traditional town gown relations, to really change our approach to that and to start to embed some of the values that you see throughout the Place-Based Justice Network in what you would call more traditional work. And so that really was able to be kind of layered on to my role, as well as Alex Tonar, Assistant Director of Community Engagement. We were really free to think about the why behind our work, be able to change the way we were having conversations with our neighbors closest to home in Oakland, to campus, to be more intentional and I'd say open, right, to what are very fair, I'd say, challenges that the community directly adjacent to our campus may have in being a neighbor to such a large institution. And so we've been able to change the way we think about our programming, change the way that we communicate, and also change the way that we partner, looking to actively build new programs that can meet really what the community is telling us day in and day out. So I'm thrilled to just be on the team. I'm thrilled to be part of the, I'd say, culture wave of critical engagement at the University of Pittsburgh. I think my next slide, really to just kind of talk about the pathway towards institutionalizing this, is really thinking about the people, the tools, the infrastructure necessary to support these types of changes being able to happen broadly, to be able to share the good word. How are we networking people internally and externally? How are we doing the culture preparation necessary to approach community engaged scholarship with a certain level of respect? And so we've got full toolkits, resources for our faculty, staff, students to orient themselves to community engaged work, to the values of the CECs, and I'd argue the values of our community engaged practitioner networks across campus. We're building outreach and engagement maps so people can see each other and find each other to be able to collaborate effectively. We're finally institutionalizing events that are uplifting engaged practices across our campus. And so all of these things working together really are helping us to, I'd say, spread some education about the values of, self-determination, community identified goals, collective learning and action. We're trying to just kind of live them out daily. And it's been a really exciting road. It's been a really exciting 3 years at the University of Pittsburgh. So I just want to give props to the CEC team. They might be watching, and I know that they've spent time with the network. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jamie. I was forgetting we have our West Coast Oakland and our East Coast Pittsburgh Oakland neighborhood.
Sorry, yes, the second Oakland.
We will move to Maryland and hear from Marie.
Back again here in Baltimore. Welcome, Huns. So my name is Marie McSweeney Anderson, and I am the Assistant Director for Loyola University Maryland's York Road Initiative. And as of this semester, I am also a double graduate of the university. So for folks who aren't aware, Loyola is a Jesuit Catholic liberal arts university located in the northern part of Baltimore City. It's a predominantly white institution with about 4,000 undergraduate students who mainly live on campus, and the student body is about 23% students of color, which has changed since I was an undergraduate student. In Baltimore City, my wonderful city, it has about 600,000 residents and over 250 beautiful, amazing, distinct neighborhoods, and about 65% of the residents in Baltimore are Black or African American. And so our initiative is a place-based community development strategy focused on the Govins neighborhood, which is directly adjacent to Loyola's main campus. And our main campus is really bounded by two historic white covenant communities. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. And York Road is the name of the large commercial corridor running between the predominantly white communities to the west side, which the university is a part of, and then the predominantly Black and African American communities to the east. It is also one of the starkest divisions of race, income, life expectancy in the entire city of Baltimore, which, if you know anything about Baltimore, is already very segregated itself. And so this initiative was created as part of the university's 2008 strategic plan. As a Catholic institution, we're very familiar with the concept of charity. And so this really took a look at the concept of justice. And at a national level, the conversation was really talking about anchor institutions. How are anchors serving their neighborhoods closest to campus? How do anchor institutions utilize resources in order to benefit and support the local community? And so the focus areas that you see on your screen right now were created by residents. They were created through a listening survey. Erin, who you just heard from, came on board in 2010. I came on board in 2012. And so we have a lot of long-held, really deep relationships. And then our team, the York Road Initiative, was really joined together with the traditional Center for Community Service and Justice, which holds a lot of the immersion, service learning, et cetera. And that added additional capacity, staffing, and resources. So if you want to jump to the next slide. As I said, it's really, or as Jennifer said, it's really difficult to put into 5 minutes the values of everything that we do. But I chose this photo as a reflection of the many values, particularly pursuing partnerships and initiatives that are long-term, reciprocal, and grounded in deliberative process. And I think this really captures an example of what happens when there are long-term, trusting relationships when immediate action is needed. This moment was not attached to a program, a project, a semester, and the work and the relationship that we have with residents. It still informs the work that we do right now, particularly in this time period of responding to the COVID-19 crisis. So this photo, it was April 2015. It was taken the day after the uprising began in 2015, after Freddie Gray was murdered by police. Resident leaders, we were up together all night, texting, calling each other, and they called for immediate action the next day. Over 200 people showed up to the York Road Initiative office to gather for a community peace march of the 3-mile stretch of corridor for 2 days in a row. not just one day, but multiple days. And so as across the nation, folks were looking at the screen, the burning CVS over and over, this was happening all over the city of Baltimore. And so what I want to communicate is this is what happens when resident leaders and institutions already have trust and communicate with each other. Institutions don't have to ask what is needed because they're already an active member and an active participant. And trust and communication happens when those relationships are long-term, reciprocal, and grounded in deliberative process. So here we are, 5 years later, it's 2020. Literally nothing is perfect. Look at us now. But relationships and proximities are such core values. Place-based work is important because we're working directly with our neighbors. Institutions aren't going anywhere. And if we don't know who our neighbors are, especially the most vulnerable or underserved, who are we truly serving? As institutions, having conversations about justice is so important, but we can't have those conversations legitimately if we're not taking that critical approach to community engaged work. And so that's what I really value about the PBJ network. It's important because it puts the practice of the how and not just the what. The values are not in silos. They are important altogether. And like I said, this work comes with humility. By no means will any of us say that we have it perfect. We're all learning together along the way. But universities have creative and innovative ways to resource and support the work of residents and resident-led organizations if they only value and listen to their voices. Thanks.
Thank you, Marie. I feel like I was just churched a little bit, which was awesome. Thank you. I will move our church down to John Loggins at the University of San Diego.
Thank you. Peace and love, y'all. Again, I'm John Loggins. I'm with the University of San Diego. I'm the Director of Community Engaged Learning in the Mulvaney Center for Community Awareness and Social Action. And I want to give shout outs to our team who has been doing this work for quite a while. And I'm here representing a lot of their hard work today. You'll see on the slide, it says 35 years of community leadership, and that is creating place-based community engagement and building these democratic and reciprocal partnerships. And how I see that lived out is really, I see it as 35 years of building solid relationships. We have a long history, and I'm not sure where you all are coming from. If you are in a shop that's just starting, or a small or well-established one that has institutional support and grant funding. So I was going to kind of paint in broad strokes to say share a little bit of our trajectory as well. And we started off as a very small volunteer office that had like one little office and one staff person, kind of moved into an office of community service learning, and then a center for community service learning, and then finally what we are right now, and where we're focusing more on community engagement. And what that looked like to me in the process, and I say to me, I haven't been there all 35 years, but I've been there for going on 18 years of those now. So it's been a minute that I've been there. But to be able to see us kind of move from seeing our work in the community as transactional, and I don't mean to make that sound so negative, but I think, when you're thinking about traditional service learning, oftentimes it was about meeting some learning objectives that we had. How do we plug those things into the community? And when we started shifting to thinking about things as a relationship, I think that really started to let us grow roots in the community. So when we start thinking of things as a relationship, we stopped highlighting and focusing on the deficits that we were trying to fix in those communities, and it really shifted our gaze to find what was beautiful in the neighborhood. I give a lot of credit and a hat tip to Elaine Elliott, our former director, who is really focused on having us look at the beauty in these communities. And I think when you think about it in those terms, you see that it resonates a lot with how communities feel they're seen and how they're taken up. I oftentimes share with our students when I think a lot of them come to us with this kind of traditional service mindedness and wanting to go in and help these communities. And I'll always ask them, like, well, when you have friends or family come visit you, do you take them to the worst parts of your town? Do you take them to the places that you don't want people to see or that you don't think they'll resonate with? You take them to the places that you love. And I feel like, you know, when you're trying to get people to engage with the community and in a real meaningful way that doesn't kind of lean into, you know, post-colonialism or a savior mentality, you get them to fall in love with those communities. You know, I think that when one of my favorite quotes is Cornel West's "Justice is what love looks like in public." And so for us to be able to create those spaces for students, I think is great. And at the same time, and when you're building those relationships, your partners kind of cease to be recipients of all your benefit, but become co-educators for us. And you really start to see the value and value their wisdom that they're offering our students. So instead of seeing them as a place where our students can get all this learning and make connections to their coursework, which they can do, I still don't knock that. I think it's very valuable. We can start to say, hey, the wisdom that's held in that community has a lot to offer a lot of our students, and then we roll with that. We can advance to the next slide. Brevity has never really been my strong suit, so I'm going to maybe speed through some of these as I realize I spent a little bit more time on that one. So on this slide, you'll see places where we invested a lot of time and energy in building those relationships. These are communities that we love and that we cherish. Linda Vista is the community that we sit in. We've listed the Kumeyaay in that category just for this slide. They are our indigenous peoples that still have an ongoing relationship with the land, and we try to pay respect to them. And how that shows up oftentimes is in Linda Vista, and how our university chooses to you know, show respects and continue to stay connected with them within our own community. Logan Heights, City Heights, Tijuana, they're all places that we have really established and made commitments to, and I think that is ongoing work that we are dedicated to doing. Can we advance one more time? And then I think a lot of this was already shared about what anchor institution values are, so I won't necessarily reiterate a lot of it. You know, I think the focus on democratic and reciprocal partnerships is really important. I think when you're thinking about an anti-oppression framework, if it's not democratic, you're not both coming to the table, if you're not co-creating together, how can that be democratic? And I think oftentimes we, you know, we'll lose sight of, okay, we want to make this easier for our partners. We want to make it easy for our faculty members to step into this so they don't have to do a lot of work. And I think that is great for a lot of centers to do, but I think if you want it to be sustainable and you want to have that approach to where it is focusing on democratic reciprocal partnerships, you need to invite them in, create a space for them to do the work, and actually give the work to them and let them do it. And I feel like that's given us a lot of great results. And then on to the last slide. Sorry. This is a list of the different things that are going on campus. I think, again, we're been around for 35 years, and when I started on campus, I wouldn't say we were necessarily the only game in town when it came to connecting with the community, but there was very few things. And I think our approach has been one that shares our partnership, shares our connection, and has been really trying to push this notion of going away from service learning or traditional service learning to more of a community engagement approach. And that has opened up a lot of possibilities for a lot of different divisions. You know, we now have an Institute for Peace and Justice, a Center for Peace and Commerce, an engineering exchange for social justice, a small business program called The Brink, a nonprofit institute. You know, in all of our colleges of arts and sciences, our law school, our school of nursing, they're all really engaged in the community. And I think that was a result of a lot of work in trying to ensure that we weren't doing it all. We weren't holding the keys to all the access to the community partnerships, or we weren't the one thing that the university could always point to and say, like, look at the great work that we're doing. We wanted to really be able to say, like, everybody's involved in this, and I think we're doing a great work on those fronts. And Chris and Maria in our office are doing great work in terms of making sure that we're financially thinking in our supply chain, who we're hiring, you know, all of those things that are important parts of being an anchor institution, and focusing on the places that we're at is essential. So sorry for going a little bit over.
It's all good, John. Thank you. And we will head up the California coast to Karen Cotterman and the University of San Francisco.
Hi, everyone. Greetings from San Francisco. I'm Karen Cotterman. I direct Engage San Francisco at the University of San Francisco, and Engage is located within the Leo T. McCarthy Center for Public Service and the Common Good. It's great to be here. I appreciate everyone joining, and I want to recognize that the Place-Based Justice Network is a wonderful network that means a lot to me both personally and professionally, and as Erin O'Keefe referred to earlier, provides support and challenge both. So the first slide I have here is the vision for Engage San Francisco. And embedded within this and under this vision are two goals. One I refer to as the external goal, which focuses on contributing to and supporting a vibrant, thriving community for children, youth, and families in the Western Addition. And the second goal is really the internal goal, which focuses on enhancing student learning and faculty research in the Jesuit tradition with key connections to the mission of USF. So I want to say a little bit about the theory of change for Engage and then a little bit of a context for our work. So the theory of change for Engage San Francisco, given that we work in and with the Western Addition Fillmore neighborhood just adjacent to campus, we focus on supporting and lifting up African American histories and knowledge in and with community. We work on partnership capacity building and health equity and addressing that directly through partnerships. And we also address education equity, focusing on learning, college access, and specifically through our literacy programming. So like the other initiatives that you've been introduced to today, Engage San Francisco is university-wide and it's interdisciplinary. And again, we work in and with the Western Addition and Fillmore neighborhood. And I want to say a little bit about the context about working in and with that community, because that's significant. And I also want to recognize that I don't want to just document damage, as scholars Tuck and Yang refer to. So often we're asked to, particularly in fundraising contexts, to document the damage that has happened, which is very deficit-based. But I also think that it's important to recognize the challenges and the impacts of institutional racism and get at that critical lens that others have referred to that's so critical for this work. So I want to recognize that in World War II, there was a great migration when many African Americans moved to San Francisco to work in the shipyards. Harlem of the West was the term that was used to describe the Fillmore at that time because it had a robust nightlife and a robust African American community. And so if we jump ahead to the impacts of redevelopment and redlining in the 70s, over 10,000 residents were displaced, 2,500 Victorians were destroyed, 60 blocks were cleared in the Fillmore, therefore displacing thousands and thousands of individuals. That has had ongoing impacts within the city of San Francisco, but particularly in the Fillmore. And that links to this history in the context of outmigration that's ongoing now. So citywide, we have less than 5% African American or Black identified residents. And in the Western Addition, there's 20%. That's layered because the Bay Area has some of the highest income inequality in the entire state of California and the entire United States. So all of this is some of the context that we bring to bear in understanding what challenges currently exist alongside the beauty and the strength and the resilience that's present in the Western Addition and the Fillmore. And this is a particularly important conversation to have with students, as well as faculty, board members, staff, anyone who is not familiar with the Fillmore. I've definitely met folks who are native San Franciscans who don't know about this history. In the next slide, I just want to highlight and sort of go deeply into one example of place-based justice values in action. Several years ago, there was a USF alumna who called me up and said, look, I've got a couple friends who are working on a project and USF should be involved. One of those friends was Lynette White, who's in the flowered jacket here in the photo. These two women were gathering biographies of African-American change makers, and they asked for a partnership. They said, we're writing and creating this book, but we need help. Will you work with us? What resulted was a 3-year-long project that's still ongoing. 2 professors were involved. One's in the photo, the woman on the left in the orange dress. She's a professor of sociology, Stephanie Sears. Over 100 students were involved in researching and writing, building relationships, and connecting the history of African-American leaders within San Francisco into their writing project. And what resulted was the Changemakers book, which you see in the woman in the black dress is holding a copy in her hand. So students did original research, they interviewed individuals, they went into archives when possible. And this photo was taken at the launch that took place in September, and just in 2019. Over 400 people attended the launch. We've distributed over 800 books. The San Francisco Human Rights Commission director is creating curriculum for use with the books. We want to recognize we don't own these stories. What USF has done is build the capacity to create the book in response to a request and very much in partnership with the women who had initiated capturing these stories. And what it's done is supported student learning about power, privilege, and oppression, and African-American histories, and the legacies of change makers who helped create the city of San Francisco. And those stories may otherwise be invisible. So I'll leave it at that as one concrete example, and we'll move to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. After this kind of dive into 4 institutional examples and personal reflections, we're going to kind of bring our lens back out to another aspect of the Place-Based Justice Network, and that is our attention to what we call polarities in the work. And you've heard these referenced in the comments thus far from our panelists. And Erin, we'll come back to you to tell us a little bit about polarities, please.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Karen and the panel. First of all, I realized I didn't introduce myself before. So I am Erin O'Keefe. I'm at Loyola University in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm the director of our Center for Community Service and Justice and our York Road Initiative. And as Marie referenced, we have a 10-year-old place-based effort, and our center here at Loyola is 28 years old. So in the context of how long this work takes, right? John really talked about 35 years at San Diego. I know Jamie and the team at Pitt, and certainly Ken in Seattle, and all of us, this is work that takes a long time and a significant amount of patience and trust. And I think for us as a network, one of the things that has helped us manage that patience and continue to build that trust is working through the lens of polarities. And so thank you in advance to Yarrow Durbin at Courage Work, who is a colleague of our friends at Seattle U, who thoughtfully enough was able to share her work with us early on as this network was really coming together. And polarities are really a term of art in some sense, but it's the concept of these two interdependent sides that both have good in them. And I think they're particularly important for us right now as we are seeing how interdependent our own economy and our own families and our own neighborhoods are as we are taking a look at the crisis all around us. Many of us on every campus across our country are really going to be challenged and are challenged right now by the tensions we are experiencing. Are we prioritizing safety? Are we prioritizing finances, right? I mean, that's the classic one that we're experiencing right now. And the work of polarities is these are in tension, right? Our public health and our economy right now. They're both needed to be able to reach this higher purpose and to bring us into equilibrium. And if we overdo one at the neglect of the other, we're certainly guaranteed trouble. I think what's helpful for me, and I just would like to thank all of my team and our Center for Community Service and Justice here at Loyola, because, my mantra has always been, okay, that's a polarity. That's not going to be resolved. That is a tension that we have to manage every day. And I think this is language that's helpful for us to bring to our campus partners as well as our campus leadership right now, that these are tensions, or there are many tensions that we experience in this work, but I do think they are heightened right now. And so, Jennifer, I'll just ask us to move into the next slide, and we'll go through some of those examples that are very common experiences for us. So in any community work, right, how do we provide strong, decisive leadership as universities that want to put out a vision and certainly get all the resources lined up and championed for things, but at the same time build that collective voice and have that patience to ensure that we're really approaching things through a servant leadership model, or being really patient with the time it takes to build collective voice, and then eventually lead through that. That is a polarity that I think all of the presentations that you just heard, from our universities across the country, we deal with that on a day-to-day basis, right? Likewise, our own awareness of the privilege that we have, certainly to even log in today, to watch this conference and to be here with our own health, to be able to be critically thinking about our field right now, and questioning our own work as we move forward, and yet being out on the ground doing the work, right? I'll be honest, even Marie knows this, I didn't deliver the produce that I should have delivered this morning to our local food pantry. We had to ask another volunteer because I needed to get the other things done this morning so that I could be here with you all, right? That is a privilege that I have. And so many of my colleagues in our community partners right now do not have that level of privilege. Likewise, depth and breadth, right? This is a classic. How many volunteers, how many service learners are we going to be able to meet the needs of this fall? And likewise, at what breadth are we really going to be able to touch them to help them understand the full implications of what they're seeing all around them? And I think, that is a tension that we constantly experience in this work. The one that, always rings true for each and every one of us is college student learning and community impact. And as Kent shared, there's someone outside my door right now, so might have to close the door in a second. As Kent shared, our network has always been committed to moving toward equal impact on campus and community. As our universities are cutting costs right now, and we are more attuned to the impact of our interconnectedness with our community partners. This is going to be the tension that we as a network, and certainly as colleagues in the community engagement field, are really going to be grappling with over the next couple of months. I can just share practically that, as an anchor institution, we've committed to sourcing produce to a number of our corner stores in our local York Road community, and we've been doing that for over 5 years now. Well, when our dining services, ceases operations on campus, then that impacts our ability to order large in bulk, right? Which then impacts our corner stores. And so there are a number of different polarities that we will be managing in different ways as we move forward. But I do think this is a helpful framework for us as we do value the relationships that we have with all our partners, and in the meantime need to get the work done on the ground, and do it in a sense of urgency, with a sense of urgency. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Erin, and to all of our panelists today. Amazingly, we have kept to time. So I'll just describe this last slide about opportunities for future engagement, and then we definitely have time for conversation and questions. So right after this session, there is a Slack networking session as part of Compact 20. So some of us, as well as others in the network who you haven't met yet today, are going to be on Slack if you want to engage with any of us there. We host a monthly Zoom call with rotating topics and presenters. And we've designed this Thursday's call, which is tomorrow, to be a larger Q&A opportunity, conversation opportunity. So you can register for that. We would love to see you. We have a virtual summer institute. Usually that is in person, and we are going virtual as everyone is these days. We have something called the Place-Based Justice Network Fellows, and that is a way that we are promoting and continuing to provide ongoing professional development and support, particularly for young professionals of color in the network who are interested in a work in community engagement, either as faculty or as staff. And so we do have that as an initiative that is ongoing. And then we also just wanted to add that the book that Kent referenced, that he and Erica Yamamura produced 2 years ago, that really was the research that brought forth the idea of the network. That is something else that you might be interested in pursuing. Everything on this slide is available at the Place-Based Justice Network website, and these slides are available. The last thing I will show you is the contact information for the presenters. Again, you can check out these slides where Compact makes them available in case you want to follow up with any of us or our colleagues who are also involved in this network and engaged in what would have been a much larger opportunity had we been in Seattle. So I want to thank you all for being here. This has been fun, been interesting, right? And I guess Marisol, we'll take it back to you. I will stop sharing my screen for now.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for the presentation. Just had me thinking about a lot of the work that happens at our institutions and the importance of kind of holding that tension and understanding our role in that. So we have a number of questions from our audience. So I'll start off with a simple one and we'll get into kind of ones that are a little bit more in depth. So this question's from YouTube. I heard reference to the York Road Initiative office. Is that in the community? What does that look like?
Yeah, so Erin can also jump in if you want. So we do have pieces of our campus do touch York Road. I wouldn't say it's considered the main campus, but we have a large parking lot, and that's where the farmers market also takes place. And so it's one of the largest gathering spots that we have in the community, where both sides of the road really come together on a weekly basis.
Yeah, thanks, Marie. So we have two offices for our center and our York Road Initiative. We have a campus space that is really the site where majority of our students are coming between classes, and then we have a community office that is on York Road. And because we do have swipe access, we're able to give that access to neighborhood residents, so they're able to have meetings there at night, as well as utilize it for, as Marie said, it serves as the hub for our seasonal farmers market, as well as summer meals program and other community events throughout the year.
Great, thanks. So this question comes from Facebook. Place-based initiatives have long been part of tourism development and becoming a bigger part of community economic development. How can all these areas integrate for a more comprehensive effort with deeper collaborations? So the idea of tourism development becoming part of broader community economic development. Any thoughts?
I can share a little reflections from Seattle.
Yeah.
One of the neighborhoods that encompasses our place-based work is the Chinatown International District, and it is it's an attraction to visitors to Seattle. It also has a very long history, and then for the university in our work, it's thinking of how we come alongside both understanding that history and how we also can amplify and support small businesses, and the ways that our university and our students might be thinking of how they can learn both the current context of that particular neighborhood, but also the history of that neighborhood. Our efforts involve two other neighborhoods as well, and there's some similar efforts there, which can begin to drive how students look to engage in the city and spend their dollars, which can become sort of an economic opportunity as well.
And if I could just add that I think, you know, that one of the core value of being committed to an anti-oppression framework, you know, tethering ourselves to that principle, I think is crucial. Because I think as we oftentimes go into the communities, I think we, you know, see ourselves as doing this work, but reminding ourselves to challenge ourselves to make sure we're asking ourselves that question consistently is really, really important. And one of the things I wanted to share earlier too about the next generation fellows, I think, you know, for me, that's an example of how our our network is doing it for ourselves. I think it's easy to think of ourselves as trying to push justice and anti-oppression practices out in the world, but to actually turn the gaze inside and say, as a field, what are we doing to young professionals of color? Who are we asking to represent the university out in the community? What are we putting on their shoulders? And I think for us to be very deliberate about naming that, creating a program around that, and working our way through it. I don't think we've got anything figured out yet, but I think that's a part of our process.
Yeah, no, that's so important. That's also where we're going as Campus Compact and thinking about our own Engaged Scholars Initiative. So along those lines, this question comes from YouTube. At the risk of sounding naive, is there a benefit in couching the language for majority groups that diversity means inclusive for all, ensuring everyone is considered fairly, not just minorities? Should I repeat that? Yep. Is there a benefit in couching the language for majority groups that diversity means inclusive for all, ensuring everyone is considered fairly, not just minorities?
I can take a crack at it. I don't think that we need to couch anything. I think inclusivity means inclusivity, and I think sometimes that means confronting our history and our past, and that may push some buttons for some folks. But I think it's an important part of the conversation. I think it's our job to create the context and hold that energy when it does come up, and be able to respond to it with a lot of love and grace. But I think that creating spaces for us to challenge and support are wonderful. But personally, I think we all do it differently at our different institutions. I like to call it for what it is, and name some of the dynamics that have been historical, that have existed, and that may make people feel a certain way, but not to judge them for that, or but create a space for them to work it through with us if they choose to, when they're ready.
Right, and that also speaks to the difference between equity and equality, and understanding that inclusiveness also means, at least for me, thinking about the ones that have been historically marginalized and bringing those up to the front, right? Creating space for that. So another question, any suggestions for incorporating place-based justice principles and efforts into event planning, ensuring benefits and relationships develop when events are held in particular places?
I think that's a great question, and is really one that goes back to relationships and also sense of place, right? So we started out with a land acknowledgement, and so when you're having an event, perhaps some of the things that you can consider is who do you know in this community? What relationships do you have? What are the existing partnerships that are existing? Is there a community development corporation? Is there a coalition of folks that are already working on the ground to advance an empowering mission for that neighborhood or that community? And how can you partner with them? How can you reach out and share that there are ways that you can benefit each other? And I'll pass it to my colleague Jamie, because it seems like she has some good things to share as well.
Yeah, events are fun, right? So, first I would say, shop local whenever possible. And if you can shop hyper local, even better. At our community engagement centers, there's always a small business owner, minority small business owner that's catering the events. When we throw block parties, we started off throwing just kind of one back to school block party. We're now having 6 in recognition that different parts of the neighborhood have different needs. We don't want to force people to go all the way across the other side of the neighborhood to be able to have fun with their neighbors. And so we're up to 6. We pick the dates with our community members at the monthly community meetings. We pick the menu with our community members at the monthly meetings. So if you're there and you're showing up month after month, week after week, and you all know each other, I think there's a way that you can really be sure to make sure that it's not an institutional event, right? That it's a community event.
Great, thanks. And our last question before we finish is, and if we can answer this one quickly, what is the role of your presidents and top tier leaders in supporting and advancing this work? Are there institutional structures that are aligned to integrate the work across the institution? And if you can't get to it right now, maybe in the Slack that's coming up, you can do that. But quickly, the role of the presidents and top tier administration.
Leadership matters a lot in terms of presidential leadership, provost leadership, other vice presidents, and we can talk more about that in the Slack, but it's one of the things that we found in the scan of institutions. It's not, that doesn't make it dependent, like place-based work can occur, but it significantly helps if there's leadership of the university that's on board.
Absolutely. That's why Campus Compact is the presidential leadership organization, right? And then we continue to do the work with our community engagement professionals and faculty, so we understand that that balance, right? So I just want to thank you all so much. This was great, and I'm so glad we got the opportunity to bring you on as part of our Compact 20 virtual conference. Please check out the Slack networking session that the folks from the Place-Based Justice Network will be on shortly, and continue to be in conversation with them. They're doing amazing work. We're so proud to support their work and have them here today. So thank you all so much for your time and sharing your knowledge and love with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Love everyone.
Thanks, Manisol. Good to
Thanks.
see you.